Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of Sunday, May 26th, 2024. Today we have another game demonstration in store for you. 2 weeks ago on May 12th, we demonstrated LEV the game on longevity escape velocity. And that game is still in development. We are looking forward to subsequent versions of it arriving soon. But today's game is a bit different. It is based on Death is Wrong, the illustrated children's book that I authored in 2013. It was published in late November 2013, so now more than a decade ago. And this book has inspired quite a few creative ideas within the longevity community. And one of these ideas has actually been a decade in the making. My friend Adam Alonzi, who joins us today, is a writer, author, biotechnologist, documentary maker, futurist, inventor, and programmer. And he has been quite fond of the Death is Wrong book ever since it came out. He did an audio narration of it, and he and I have been discussing in the background the idea of a platformer game, a classic platformer game. Think Mario, for example, because, of course, Death is Wrong is a children's book, and we want to reach a large number of young minds with the book. We know that children love to play games, and platformer games have been a staple of children's entertainment and perhaps many older people's entertainment as well ever since the 1980s. So this would be a great way to spread the ideas of indefinite life extension to a younger demographic. So I want to, first of all, invite Adam Alonzi to speak a bit about his vision for the Death is Wrong game and where he hopes that it will go. And then I will also talk about a bit of the recent history and give a demonstration of the first level of the game, which is ready to be played. So Adam, please go ahead.
All right, everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So, Death is Wrong, of course, has a philosophical underpinning, but it's also a way to teach people about the hallmarks of aging. One of the biggest obstacles to educating the public and getting them to accept aging as a treatable condition is showing them that it can, in fact, be managed by breaking it down. It's not something that's magical, mystical, or inevitable. It can be solved through science. It is a tractable engineering problem. And that's one of the goals of the game, and one of the ways, or one of the reasons why we've set it up the way we have, with different levels representing different hallmarks, different contributors. The villains, everything is a sprawling allegory of the hallmarks of aging. So we're planting these seeds in young minds, I hope inspiring them to get into biotech, pharma, medicine, whatever strikes their fancy.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And hopefully a lot of young minds will be inspired. Our friend and 2024 vice presidential candidate Daniel Tweed asks, what is a platformer game? And my response is, think about a two-dimensional game where the character jumps on platforms, fights monsters, collects power-ups, and advances through various levels. So Mario is the franchise which I think is the best known, but there are numerous others as well. And it looks like we have Adam back to join us. Hello.
Well, the back button and the mute button are pretty close together. But yes, young minds and older ones too. There are plenty of people and people with power, with money, who need to understand that aging is tractable.
Yes, absolutely. And a game like this has the advantage that it can convey this understanding to multiple generations. Because if you think about the people who grew up playing the early platformer games, which were released in the 1980s, so the first Mario game was released before I was born, these people are now middle-aged and they still remember these kinds of games and their mechanics. So we can reach both kids today as well as people who are in their 30s, 40s, perhaps even older. So this is quite promising. So now I also want to talk a bit about what happened this year in terms of the development of the game, because Adam and I reached out to a company in Bangladesh called Robust Research and Development, and they gave us a good price on the first level of the game. And Adam has been in communication with them, providing instructions about the creative vision for the game, some graphical resources which we have accumulated over the years, which I will show you as well. And they, over the course of a few months, put together the first level to be completely playable. We have a plan to crowdfund the rest of the development of the game. And either way, this game is going to get done. So we have enough resources to finish the game, just as is the case with LEV, the game. But we do want the community to take part in it and give us suggestions for certain game content, levels, characters, images, power-ups, anything that you have in mind, because we do want this game to represent the longevity community. But Adam, if you would like to speak further as to your interactions with Robust Research and Development and how that process proceeded, feel free to say a few words on that. Oh, you need to unmute. Yes.
So Robust and I have worked on a couple projects together. I'm impressed with their turnaround, professionalism, and that's one of the reasons why I brought them on to this project. Like they said, getting the mechanics in order, getting everything set up in the first place is really the hardest part. And from here, now we can begin to quickly expand, become creative, because the donkey work is out of the way.
Yes, indeed. And I think the programming work that was done to bring these game mechanics into being is going to be reusable across levels. So essentially, we have the basics down. The rest is a matter of essentially the creative vision being fully fleshed out and implemented. So I think we can launch into our demo here. And here we see the start screen for the Death is Wrong game. When I shift to it, you're going to hear some game music. It's going to come through my speakers, so it might be a little bit tinny. However, I do think the music and the sound effects add quite a lot to the game experience. And furthermore, we will want more music. So right now, the music is essentially a stock melody for the main gameplay, and then there will be a victory track as well. But you can see here we have a nice logo for the Death is Wrong game. We have this ominous city background, and the character is this young man in the blue shirt and red tie on this very provocative cover of Death is Wrong. He is banishing the Grim Reaper, but he has quite a challenge ahead of him because he needs to pass through all of these multiple levels representing the various perils that can afflict humans and bring about their mortality. And the first level is pretty basic. It's pretty rudimentary. These are the, let's say, easy monsters and minor perils that people can face, but you will see some of them in this level. So let's get started. And hopefully you can hear the game music a bit. Let's press start. No one likes split shoelaces. Protect your telomeres. So this young lady is going to be helping the young man in the red tie throughout the game. Now he's approaching a box. You can jump on the box. The slug is the first enemy here. Very basic enemy. You can jump over the slug, and you can collect chromosome as a power-up. Here's another box. Another slug. Got him. And we have 3 points. So there is a points mechanic here where you need to collect these power-ups to maximize your score. You can see on the top left-hand side, one has essentially 3 units of health. And if one makes a mistake, if one runs afoul of an enemy or runs into an obstacle, one loses 1 unit of health. So all of this is a very common set of platformer elements. And now we see here's a weapon, little blaster. But we've got some ice, and we've got this flying blob. And this young lady says, watch out for the wind and ice. So the ice is slippery. The character will slide on it. So the first peril that he encounters is just the peril of tripping and falling on the ice. We don't want to do that, and there are some spikes here as well. But let's see if we can overcome this blob monster. All right. So the blob monster is no more. Now we've jumped across the spike. Here's some more spikes. Oh, looks like he got struck by the spike. And here's this rotating saw. We don't want to hit that. Okay. Got another power-up, and now here's a moving platform. You can go on the platform, but it's not that reliable, so you have to figure out how to maneuver here. You can jump pretty high, though. All right, we're past the ice portion, and now we've got these platforms in the air. They're pretty stable gold platforms. The issue is we don't quite know what is around us. But it looks like we've collected some power-ups. And oh, by this door, we've got some winged shoes. Let's get the winged shoes. They will enable us to jump a bit higher. We can neutralize the slug. All right, we've got that slug. This slug is not essential to remove. We've got 1 more power-up to collect, and then something will happen. Okay, save yourself. Oh, this is a boss battle. And all of these blocks are coming for us. Oh, look. This is an older version of our character. This is our character as an old man. We need to save him from the ravages of aging. And all of these monsters are coming at us. Fortunately, we have our trusty blaster here. All right. They just keep coming. Ah, looks like we've got a victory flag here. We've neutralized them all. Okay. And that was the first level. So here you can hear the victory tune. It says game completed, thanks for playing. Obviously, this is not the entire intended game. This is just the introductory first level, intended to teach people the game mechanics. But this is how the essential gameplay will operate. And of course, over time, as new levels get created, the difficulty will increase. There will be new kinds of enemies, different power-ups, different obstacles, different backgrounds, all of that. So thank you for watching this demonstration. As the next part of the salon, I would like to preview some of the graphics that we've already assembled. Now, all of these are somewhat tentative in the sense that they could be included in future levels, but it's still open to our future decision. And we need a lot more graphics as well. So we hope to crowdsource those, utilize any that are open source, use generative AI as well. I will demonstrate an application of generative AI to this particular game. But let's look at some possibilities here. So we need additional backgrounds for future levels. So here's an example of a jungle-themed level where there could be various perils and obstacles. Another background was generated using AI by our friend Cyborg Dre, and he just shared this with me yesterday. So this is a kind of garden level with a waterfall, intending to demonstrate essentially the theme of decay. You can see how everything here is overgrown, and there could be some perils there if you're in a place that's decrepit and overgrown. There could also be a variety of city backgrounds. So this is a kind of rudimentary city concept. And those of you who remember our very first virtual enlightenment salon with Alexandria Black, this was before we had various tools to create backgrounds. So I just used this background essentially on the cover image of the salon. I tweaked it a bit, but this is a pretty versatile city background, but we have other city backgrounds as well. So a kind of outline of a city. We have one at night. We have one at sunset. Various perils could include, for instance, famine. So this is a kind of dry landscape, or war. Here is a battlefield on fire. This is another kind of bleak cityscape that the character could visit. And I would say some of the backgrounds could be a bit more elaborate. So this is a possibility, a kind of futuristic cityscape. We could take elements of it and perhaps blend them with other background art. Now, there were some images that were kind of rough when I received them, but I would be open to having them essentially developed further and finalized. Part of the Death is Wrong book, my own story within it as a child, takes place in the botanical gardens in the city of Minsk, where I was born. And this is essentially a rough digital painting of the walkway around the lake in the botanical gardens. This was when, at the age of 5, I realized essentially that all of the beauty of the world, all of the wonderful colors and sensations would just be completely gone if one dies, and there would not be a single trace of them remaining, even in memory. So it might be interesting to have a scene like that. We could also have a scene on Mars, for example. So this is a kind of rough Marsscape with a rudimentary settlement. Here, I would want it to be colorized and various details fleshed out as well, but this is a rough image that I have. And various game elements are available as open game art. So the elements that I'm going to show you were not created by our team or contributors to our team, but they're available to use, sometimes with attribution, sometimes even as public domain items. But a game on death, for example, would have tombstones, and tombstones could be part of the background. We could also have some interesting enemies here. So these are just possibilities of various hostile mythical creatures. And also, of course, we could have viruses, harmful microorganisms, depending on the level. In a level of war, we could have actual fighters as enemies. So here's a blob that shoots little green pieces of itself. And another animation of the blob as it slides forward. So we're interested in these character sprites. Many of them are pre-animated. So here's a chaos monster. Also, I would say, quite a fitting foe for a game like this. And another kind of monster along these lines. So the enemies can be mythical creatures associated with death or mortality, because we're not just fighting the diseases, we're not just fighting the actual perils, we're also fighting the mythology of death. Ultimately, I think the boss, the end boss of the game, should be the Grim Reaper. And here's a skeleton. Now this skeleton is going to do some moves here. It can jump and crouch and punch, and you will see pretty soon after, yes, you will see it being defeated as well. So it can provide quite a versatile range of motions.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so Adam, any further thoughts about game elements other than what we've seen here?
Well, and I want to remind everyone that we'll be incorporating elements from, I mean, not just the straight, linear Mario kind of thing that you'd expect, but we'll be drawing inspiration from a few different titles, giving a unique and fulfilling gaming experience.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So we welcome suggestions, and we have our friend Zack Varkaris here as well. And he has some ideas for graphical elements. So perhaps, Zach, you could talk us through some of them, and I will see if it might be possible to show them as well.
Hi, Gennady. Yeah, I'm not sure if we can download it all, but yeah, in a sense, it's like death is chasing you. Like, so you can't outrun death; you're outrunning death, and you're basically thinking of Temple Run 2 style graphics, where you have a sort of, you can play your own avatar, and your avatar literally ages or youthifies as it goes along. I can't send you the images. I tried, but it's just too much. I've shown you some of the stuff before, but I think it's really, the thing is like, you have your special, you have special pre-up gaming. So like, if you get a degree in biology, it gives you more power to fight disease, right? If you live in a certain area, you're going to more likely to die. So it is a combination, as Adam says, of a different type of gaming experience. And I think that's what it's about, because this is not like, gaming is life. Life is a game. That's one of the strap lines we have, so it's like, that's what we call it.
Yes,
I can't send you the images though, Gennady, but we do it another time. I'll forward them. You can send them on the next show.
Yes, and of course there are a lot of images that we welcome receiving from our audience members or from you, Zach. So I look forward to seeing them. But yes, you did mention the concept to me, and I posted the link to the Wikipedia entry for the Temple Run games if anybody wants to look into them. And our friend Alan Crowley has already provided a contribution of $10 for the future development of the game. Thank you very much, Alan. He wants his 3-year-old granddaughter playing this by age 5. We can make that happen. We definitely can. And we are going to put this money to good use. Thank you very much. And Mike Lazine writes, the level that we showed looks very much like Super Mario Brothers 2 and 3. Yes, thank you. And I hope that many gamers will find the mechanics of this game very familiar, and the settings very familiar as well, but of course themed after longevity and fighting death. So Francois Joanneau writes that LEV, the game that we showed previously, was more elaborate to some extent. Well, it's further along in terms of its development. So LEV, the game, can be played all the way to the end right now. And here we have the first level, but I would say this game is going to be more visually intensive. So there will need to be a lot more artwork. There will need to be a lot more level design. With LEV, the game, it's more abstract, it's more conceptual, and we can build in events just based on essentially their underlying logic. How do they affect the characters' life expectancy? How do they affect the probability of death? But in this game, of course, every level has to be designed individually. But go ahead, Adam.
Well, it's a way to viscerally express all of these abstract concepts. So it gets people fired up about something that ordinarily they would never think about, even though it's very much a part of their everyday lives.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And there are multiple ways to reach people. I would say there are different kinds of gamers. So Mike Lazine says that the LEV game, LEV the game, is more of an RPG, a role-playing game. It's interesting because, yes, you take on the role of a character. It's a turn-based strategy game as well to a certain extent, because you have various decisions that you make, and you have so many resources to allocate per turn, and then you find out how those decisions affect your character and affect the outcome of the game going forward. And this is a real-time action game, essentially, classic platformer game. So it requires some dexterity as well. It utilizes different skill sets, but it also gets you thinking about longevity. And just the fact that the game is called Death is Wrong also gets people thinking, because this is a provocative title, just like the cover of the book is provocative. And we want to leverage that because, to some extent, that kind of controversy does drive at least the initial attention of viewers, of potential players of the game. Now, once we have their initial attention, of course, the results, the impression that they get after all is done, will depend on the quality of the game itself. So this is a way to get them in the door, but we also want to make sure that the game is enjoyable to play, that going through all of the levels, they have essentially a fun experience. So Mike Lazine asks, will the Death is Wrong game be playable with a gamepad? It may be harder to do with solely a keyboard. So far, we have the keyboard mechanics. I don't know how they would integrate with a gamepad, whether that's a kind of automatic integration just based on the hardware that you have, or whether it would need to be specially programmed. But maybe, Adam, you can provide some insight.
Because of the platform we're using, we could simultaneously release the game on all major platforms. So from Xbox to PC, mobile, without a hitch. Maybe a little bit of fine tuning, but nothing significant.
Absolutely. Well, this is great news. And Zach also points out in our internal chat, life is a real-time action game. And that's correct. Sometimes we do have to utilize our physical skill sets and dodge obstacles and make sure that we don't make the wrong decisions. Now, Jason wonders, are we going to open source the code, because people can use ChatGPT nowadays and maybe provide the code for new levels? So I do have the game files for all of the builds. I am not a programmer myself, so I don't know if it's possible to extract the underlying code just from having the game files. But my understanding is our engagement with robust research and development entitles us to everything, including the underlying code. And Adam is confirming this. So yes, I think we should be able to open source anything we want. But go ahead, Adam.
I don't see any downsides to it, especially once we have it in its final commercial form and it's been out on the market for a little bit. If there's a sandbox mode, or if we want to eventually make a sandbox mode so it's a little more accessible, somebody doesn't have to download the whole thing, they can just make more levels, that I think would be a great idea, because I know for titles like Age of Empires, Duke Nukem, there are huge modding communities who really made the games what they were.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember playing Age of Empires as a kid. So I'm dating myself, but in the mid-1990s, Age of Empires was one of the most popular real-time strategy games. And I played the original Age of Empires. I played the Rise of Rome. I played Age of Empires 2, which was set in the Middle Ages. Age of Kings, it was called. It had an expansion kind of into the early modern period. And I remember how versatile the modding system was. I was a kid and I could create my own levels, populate them with characters. You had essentially military figures from various eras. You had various buildings, civilian workers as well. And you could, with a great degree of flexibility, put them on the map however you liked, and then see how they would play out and design various quite elaborate scenarios. So I think it would be great to give people that ability for the game. And that would be in line with the spirit of having the community contribute, because ultimately we want this game to be a resource for everybody and also to be representative of ideas within the community about longevity. The game will be free to play, to download, hopefully on as many platforms as possible. So similarly to LEV the game, we want to maximize its reach that way by keeping the barriers to entry down. So great suggestion, Jason. And Alan points out life is a real-time strategy game. Yes, life is an action game, a real-time strategy game, kind of fully immersive, actual reality. Mike Lazine points out the Super Mario Game Maker as another example. And he also harkens back to the MS-DOS era. Yes, I remember that as well. Though, to be perfectly honest, as a kid, I probably could not enter things into command lines, so I used an interface called Norton Commander, which was a bit more intuitive. You could go through individual directories in a more visual way. Daniel Tweed writes about Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is educational. It teaches you that a 20-sided die is the greatest regular polyhedron. Interesting comment, Daniel. And yes, games can teach people a lot. I actually learned English to a great extent by playing the original Civilization game. So again, I'm dating myself there as well, but it was a great instruction in various advanced elements of the English language, because I had to figure out how to interact with a very sophisticated game with numerous civilizations, numerous eras of human history, technologies, exploration, warfare, and I had to learn all of these terms at a young age, even before I came to the United States. So Zach says the first person to complete life level 3 wins a free Rejuvicite procedure. That's an incentive idea. Well, that's definitely an interesting incentive idea. It also means that 3 levels of the game will have to be completed. Yes. And we want that to happen hopefully this year. So as with LEV the game, my goal is to have a version that is polished and available to the public this year. And I think we can make it happen as a community, especially if we accelerate the process of development with people contributing images and backgrounds. So yes, I think that would be wonderful.
Images, backgrounds, and ideas. Like if you have a favorite level from any game, any era that you want, that you think would work, maybe with a few revisions, just let us know.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's hear from Art Ramon. Any thoughts about the demonstration and the discussion of future plans thus far?
Yeah, as far as the background art, yeah, you could easily generate it with generative AI. I've been able to upload photos into ChatGPT and have it recognize the photos without any additional comments, and it knows what it is. And I have it able to upscale images, not just in resolution, but to completely enhance the image. I could just draw a very crude image and say enhance this, and it will upscale the actual quality of the video. So yeah, I don't see any problem going forward with much more, engaging worlds of the side scroller. So yeah, it's a good start.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree, generative AI could make immense contributions and really accelerate this process. Sometimes it does need a bit of help from humans. So our friend Cyborg Dre shared another output from a generative AI with us. I'm not going to show it, but it was a bit tentative. And my thinking was, if it were to be used, it would need some heavy human editing because, for instance, generative AI does not get text right very often. Sometimes it will have misspellings or odd characters, or this background, for instance, actual character sprites in there that probably shouldn't be there at all, but they were kind of blurry and blob-like. And what happens with these generative AI programs is that they're based on correlations. So they see millions of images, including from games, and they create images that are kind of like all of those images that they've seen. But there's also a bit of variation in that because they want to create images that are unique, that haven't been created before. But sometimes that variation entails a departure from realism or from the meaning that you wanted to convey. Go ahead, Jason, if you want to comment on that.
There's different AI programs, and some do text better than others, you know, and they're getting better every day. So, I mean, within, it could be months and they're all doing text pretty good. But Ideogram is pretty good at doing text. You know, it doesn't do as good as like DALL-E 3 with like faces and hands, you know, and but it does good at text. And I think Leonardo AI is pretty good at game assets. I think, I'm not positive, but I think that's what it started as, was a game assets generator, and then it's grown into all of this other stuff. So, you know, I know there's even 3D game asset generators nowadays. I know we don't need that for this, but yeah, we got all kinds of tools the community can add stuff to. Hopefully we can get some kind of folder, you know, with like different folders in it, so that way we can put the, you know, backgrounds in this folder, and, you know, if we got code to maybe donate, we can edit in that folder, or, you know. Sounds cool.
Yes, indeed. And thank you, Jason, for this discussion of the capabilities of various AI systems and what they were intended for. I did not know that Leonardo was originally intended for game development, but if so, then that's a promising tool that we could use. And also, I want to thank Cybor or Cyborius for his generous contribution. He says he really looks forward to playing this as a gamer, and he also says that he agrees with the comment AI. He looks forward to when AI has more spatial awareness and can get the text right, and he has been trying to get the generated text to work correctly with the AI platforms that he uses. Go ahead, Adam.
Cyborius, thank you so much. I think that's fantastic. And fortunately, I work with a lot of graphic artists who don't mind fixing AI's horrible mistakes. So it's pretty streamlined at this point on my end. So I think we'll be okay there.
Yes, indeed. And by the way, this is another demonstration of why we're going to need humans to work on art, because the future of art isn't going to be just sole AI generation. It's going to be this AI human collaboration where the humans can fix the mistakes made by AI and also impart meaning upon the AI generated creations. So very important to keep that in mind. Mike Lazine asks, how do you get ChatGPT to generate art? He went to the site for ChatGPT and could not figure it out. Go to Bing. The Bing search engine is now integrated with both ChatGPT and DALL-E 3. So if you ask Bing to generate an image of something, even prompted specifically to use DALL-E 3 to generate a particular image, sometimes it will tell you that it can't, but it's lying to you, because in the same breath, metaphorically, that it's telling you that it can't do that, it actually proceeds to generate that image for you. The Bing app that you can download to your phone also has an image creator that essentially is powered by DALL-E 3. So you can generate as many AI images as you could reasonably want. I think it gives you 15 credits per day, but they recharge very quickly. And Art Ramon says that ChatGPT also has file upload. Mike Lazine says, yes, human and AI collaboration for art, and he would say music is the future. Alan says DALL-E 3 is lined into ChatGPT, but as an app. So there are many ways to access good image generation AIs for free. So I have not paid to use any AI image generator, but I do have now a fairly extensive output of AI assisted artworks, as I like to call them, because sometimes I have had to manually adjust some of them, but I am publishing them on the Rational Argumentator, which is my online magazine. And the page that I am going to share with you has a lot of these artworks already, though I am planning to publish many others over time. But please take a look and check out the ones that are already there. And Art Ramon says he has compared paid ChatGPT and free Bing AI, and he's still going with the paid version. So what would you say are the advantages of the paid version in terms of generating assets that could be used in a game, for example?
I know the file upload is a big one, because I think with the free version you cannot upload an image, at least with the ChatGPT. I'm not sure Bing. Haven't done any file uploads, but I know the ability to upload a file and have it analyze it and then go in a direction from there is big for me. And as far as output, as far as getting it to analyze, the analysis through ChatGPT was just a lot more comprehensive. And the Bing AI was just rather truncated, it seemed, compared to what ChatGPT was, outputting.
Interesting. Yes, thank you for your feedback on that. Go ahead, Adam.
I'd say the main advantage is building up context within a single chat window in GPT, so it has a larger set of instructions to run off of and has a better feel for what you want.
Yes. So, of course, ideally, especially if you're dealing with a situation where you want consistent characters that look the same in multiple scenes, or some thematic or stylistic consistency, you do want the AI to remember the previous outputs and relate the subsequent outputs to those. Now, Alan Crowley mentions Rampage Cityscape that is probably out there for use. So we will take a look at that. And Mike writes that one of the cityscapes that we showed made him think of the background to the Astro Boy platformer game that came out for the GBA SP. And he also wonders, is the Ghosts and Goblins background art in the public domain? Well, that really depends on the recency of that game. So Ghosts and Goblins, it was released in 1985. There was a later release in 2021, but some games that are that old are considered abandonware. And if they are, then it may be possible to use assets from those games. Of course, if there is an ongoing franchise, that may be more difficult. But there are games, for instance, that were made in the 1980s or 1990s, and they were made by some small game development company, and that company is no longer in existence. And if that game has just been out there for a while, but there's no existing entity behind it anymore, then it's considered abandonware, and people can essentially do what they please with it. And some games have been, for instance, adapted to later operating systems. You could have a DOS emulator and play some of these older games using it, even if you have a recent version of Windows. But anyway, thank you, Mike, for those comments. And then Alan writes, the skeleton looks good. Yes, the skeleton is quite amusing, and I hope we can make it into one of the staple enemies within the game. And he says he likes that we already have a book game tie-in, and that's the point. We want the death is wrong message to be available in a variety of ways for kids, because some kids are more avid readers than others, and I've acknowledged that this book, even though it's written as a children's book, for the very young children, it will only reach the most precocious among them. I would say in terms of reading comprehension, most 8-year-olds and older kids, teenagers most certainly, will be able to understand the book and follow it quite readily. But there will be many kids who would prefer to play a game, and we want to reach them as well. Go ahead, Jason. You should unmute.
Where can we find the book? Because I mean, that's going to be like the basis for like the art style and the, you know what I'm saying? We probably, before we start generating a bunch of art or whatever, we want to look at the source material first, right? I would think.
Yeah, of course. So here's the link to the Death is Wrong page on the Rational Argumentator. You can get PDF versions of the book in 5 languages from that page, and you will see all the artwork from the book in those PDF documents. And there are various reviews of the book available as well. There are links to where the book can be found on Amazon if you want to purchase a hard copy, paperback, of course, or if you want to purchase a Kindle version, that's available as well. But the PDFs are free, so anybody who wishes to just understand the game art can find it, or the book art for adaptation to the game. We do have that ability, so hopefully that will be easily accessible for everyone. All right, so let's take a look at some of the other feedback that we've received. This is from Jason. He writes, it would be cool if we have an option that you have family members that you can save, like if your mom is in the hospital and you can save her and watch her get young. That's interesting. Of course, in the first level, you have the task of saving yourself as an older character. So we will think about how to do that. Of course, a lot of the storyline of this main character here has yet to be written, and we will welcome suggestions about that, just as long as it comes to be a coherent, integrated narrative that relates to life extension and overcoming death. And I'll also mention this comment by Mike Lazine. Happy Memorial Day to those Americans who had U.S. Armed Services members who died. And I think that's fitting with the Death is Wrong theme as well. It is also wrong that wars claim so many lives and continue to do so. So definitely something we should recognize, and we should appreciate how tragic it is that these people lost their lives in combat or as a result of war as well. So let us hear any other comments about the game thus far. Any other observations from Art Ramon, Jason, Zach, Adam?
Yeah, I think this is, along with the other game, this is a good opportunity to create a subdomain, part of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. We have games, register to play, and use it as a recruitment tool to get people to, get their email addresses. And that way we have them on our email list. And then maybe have an option to automatically generate a certificate if they want to become a member. That way it's not so laborious on our end, creating that member certificate. So yeah, I think we could definitely funnel all this into a website.
What I would really look forward to is if we can get like a community that is adding, assets, and we get a whole bunch of stuff that we could maybe use to make even more games in the future. Because I mean, once we make a folder, and we're sharing that, and any of us can then use that asset to make another level, a game, or that's the part that I really would look forward to, is just collaborating with the community on making cool stuff.
Yes, and I definitely think we could get such a folder set up, and then Adam and I could essentially draw from the images and potentially other assets that are contributed to that folder. Now, Zach has provided some of the images that he had in mind for a kind of temple run style experience. So let's take a look at those. And here is a young lady running across a suspension bridge toward this temple in the background. And here we've got another brick path in the mountains. So this is kind of an Andean temple theme here. And here's the image of the character. Now, I'm not sure how she would integrate into the Death is Wrong game quite yet, but these are just ideas that Zach has sent, and here she is on another bridge.
Yeah,
the idea would be that you would have your own avatar, right? So that's just a random avatar. So it'd be you. But as you go through it, if you see how the bridge, the different piles of some have stones on them, some don't. So basically, you're constantly see how this one has stones missing. So therefore, as you're aging, it's harder to run, and death is chasing you. So we're death. We're actually death chasing you right now. So this is I am death chasing down your avatar. And so that's the visual. And so as you age, if you get older, you start to age, your avatar ages. And if you get it right, you start to youthify. It's just a thought.
Yeah, interesting.
And then as you youthify, what?
Go ahead, Jason.
I was just saying that's a cool idea. That's a really cool idea.
And then what you then do is thanks. And then what you then do is you as you do that, like I said, it's the first time to complete level 3. We're only on level 1. I will throw in a free rejuvenate procedure, which will give you an extra 9 years of life. It's worth quite a bit of cash. So you can, and now I'll throw that in as an incentivization to get to level 3.
Very generous of you. Thank you, Zach.
On record. It's on record. There you go. I can't think about it now.
Excellent, excellent. Well, now we need to create levels 2 and 3 as well, and make them available so that the first person can be officially verified.
And also the other thing is that when you're aging, you can have different ways of aging. It's not just lines on the face. It can be extra body weight. It can be bad knees. It can be dodgy heart rate. I don't know, whatever it could be. It could be anything, whatever you want. They could get type 2 diabetes because they eat too much sugar on the way. I mean, there's so many things you could do with that. And it could just be up and down and left and right. And then merchandising in the middle of it all. Just the thought.
Well, it would be interesting to think about how to represent those as perils, because, yes, unhealthy lifestyle choices could feature in the game in some way, maybe as enemies even, but I think that would take a bit of additional thought. And here is the final image that Zack provided, a kind of bridge over the water again, leading up to a temple in the distance. So these are quite interesting animations. Now, Zack, did you just recently generate them, or were they used in another game before?
Well, so as you know, you know about my sort of stuff I've been working on before. This one was quite easily generated. It wasn't difficult to do. Obviously, very, very generic because you can't make it specific at the moment. But this was part of the Gaia Resurrection concept that we were putting together. But it's very simple. It's exactly the same thing, because basically it's about resurrecting Gaia. Gaia is the planet, so this is life. It's the same thing. It's life. It's all about life, not death. It's about life. And so it's fundamentally, it's very easy to create it. I think the important things are the aspects that make a difference. So we know that we're not letting, we're outrunning death, basically, right? So the question is, how do you make that, how do you incorporate that visually? So maybe the path can be harder, so therefore life gets tougher, right? Life gets tougher you age, If you're thrown in the gulag, man, you're going to die a lot quicker than if you're living in the Hilton, So it's like it's how it is, and that's really the that's how we generated it. It's not difficult to generate, but it's just a question of putting the right terms in, and also getting the right input, because it's I think you're right. It should be a community thing, and a way of what's important for your life is not necessarily what's important for my life. Not everyone wants to run marathons, but some people do, So it's like that's what I'm saying.
Yes, thank you. I actually had an audio broadcast. You can still find episodes of it on YouTube from 2010, 2011, called Running from Death. And your comment reminded me of this. And this was actually recorded when I was running on my elliptical trainer, and I was discussing various issues in regard to common attitudes about life extension, responding to critics. And a lot of this commentary, I would say, is still relevant today. So for those who are interested, please check out on my YouTube channel the Running from Death series. But thank you, Zack, for those ideas and for the graphics as well. Daniel Tweed writes that he thinks when designing games, people can better actualize their imaginative superpowers. I agree. And in regard to the lifestyle possibilities, Daniel suggests you could have game characters that get fatter after eating junk food that can't jump as high. Well, it's interesting because we have the winged shoes in level 1 that enable the character to jump higher. Could there be some pitfalls, some obstacles, or some deleterious thing that the character could collect that would reduce the character's mobility or jumping ability? And this could be related to some sort of unhealthy choice or obstacle. Jason writes, there's probably open source code available somewhere for a lot of these older style games. That's a possibility. And
I was thinking Zack's idea for this Temple Run game would work as a regular Temple Run game where you're jumping and moving around or whatever, but it would also work as maybe one of them passive clicker kind of games where you know, she's just running, and then you have choices like in the other LEV game, like, you know, do I do this or do I do that? And then you just click on it, and then stuff happens, you know what I mean? To where you're not actually jumping. Some people like them passive clicker games where all they got to do is just, you know, click on something, you know, instead of, you know, jump at the right time. And there's a lot of different kind of games out there, like I was saying, that are probably, the source code's probably available somewhere that we could just hopefully throw into ChatGPT and say, hey, make this different, you know. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it.
It's interesting. Now, I do want this game to be somewhat challenging to play, because actually I remember this from my experiences as a kid. The games that keep one engaged are games that are difficult enough to kind of push the boundaries of one's skill level, so that one doesn't always succeed. It takes a bit of dexterity to actually get past a particular level, and then one ends up playing it a lot. Now, the game shouldn't be completely unforgiving. Like, if there's a game where if you make a single mistake, you die, and there have actually been some hardcore platformer games like that, then it becomes a bit nerve-wracking, because if you make a single mistake, you could lose a lot of progress, hours of progress sometimes. So you need a game that's somewhat forgiving, that gives you the opportunity to try again and play again. But if it involves enough of an element of challenge that victory isn't automatic, it's not guaranteed, then it keeps the player engaged longer, and it keeps that person thinking about the game and thinking about the premise of the game and the world in which the game takes place. And of course, for Death is Wrong, the main objective is to get people to think about mortality, about life extension, about the perils that are out there, and just the concept that death is wrong. Daniel writes, the old school 8 and 16-bit graphics definitely still have that retro kind of appeal. And yes, I agree. And I think some people will be drawn to the game for the nostalgia value, so to speak. And Alan suggests have a power-up of a sugar item next to the power-up of the axe. That way the player must choose. Maybe both are going to be essential at some point, but you want to minimize the one and maximize the other. And that may be interesting. Of course, it would be a bit of a judgment call how to configure this, because as we know, food is not uniformly bad. Even in some circumstances, sugar is not bad. For instance, if you're running and you're in the midst of burning a lot of calories, actually, Bill Andrews has told me this, the safest way to eat sugar is right before a run, because then you burn it off right away without it really causing your blood glucose to spike. So that is something to consider. Could there be some sort of short-term benefit to a sugar-based power-up? I know, of course, in a lot of platformer games, sweet items are actually beneficial within the game. So your character collects them, and they result in points or provide health in quotation marks to the character. But it will be interesting to think about how to incorporate that into the game. Mike writes that some of the Super Mario games are like that, and there are some platformers where the mid-save point is on each level, and it is not particularly cool in his words, so it can be frustrating if you're set back a lot if you make just one mistake or a few mistakes. So it's a bit of a balance. How do you make the game challenging without making it frustrating? Alan writes that there was a board game of Civilization first. That's quite interesting. Matt Richards writes, there's a tremendous work to change the mindset of what we consider to be normal, such as diseases, aging, and death. And this, I think, goes to the core of what the Death is Wrong game is about. Primarily, it's about changing mindsets. Obviously, we're not going to make scientific discoveries as part of the game, but we can get people to be aware that death is a problem, that aging is a problem, that we shouldn't just passively accept these as inevitable, but we can do something about it, and we should strive to do something to reverse these terrible causes of damage to humankind and to us as individuals. Art Ramon says, we can crowdsource ideas where our crowdsourcers leverage AI. Yes, that's very much an approach that I hope that we could implement. So thank you for all of those interesting comments. We are going to take them into consideration. And Mike says, we should not look at life as a video game where we can get extra lives or power-ups. So the idea, I think, behind his comment is we do have a great deal of fragility to our own bodies and our own lives, in the sense that it's possible to make a single mistake that messes everything up. And this is why risk aversion is a selection within LEV, the game, because I do think that's important, especially for those of us who are younger. The worst thing we can do is just foolishly throw our lives away on some risky behavior that is entirely avoidable. So Alan also mentions Oregon Trail. Now that's a game that I'm familiar with as well, since I played that as a child. And that game could be a bit unforgiving. There was some probability that your character would die of dysentery even if you did nothing improper within the game. If you made prudent decisions, your character could still die of dysentery. And I think Oregon Trail was intended to be more of an educational game about the experience of the early pioneers crossing the continental United States, even when there wasn't really the infrastructure to do that. So they were risking a lot. They were braving a lot of dangers. Now, Jason wonders, are there going to be cutscenes? And that's an interesting question. Of course, we have our guide in the game, the young lady who says, protect your telomeres, and presumably she's going to be taking a more active role in the story as the game proceeds. But I wonder if Adam has any ideas in regard to cutscenes, if he's in a position to speak about that.
Oh yeah, I just turned off my camera since I was on my data, but I'm home. Oh yes, so those were all wonderful ideas from the community. A lot of people who play video games on YouTube like to, in one way or another, intentionally hobble themselves. I don't think that really jives with our message, but if there are items that in some way slow the character down or harm them, it adds to the gameplay and still reminds people to maybe stay away from those things. But
yeah, I think cutscenes may be interesting.
Well, you could probably get that message across from that little narrator person too in the beginning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know what the mechanics would be to cut to a video or not. I don't know how that works, but I guess you could use the narrator, right?
Yeah, I mean, using still images with comic book bubbles. I know that there are generative AI video programs out there. I haven't used them extensively, but if we can make something decent or someone in the community can put something together, yeah, we can have a few for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And Jason's idea here is that a cutscene that explains some of the science behind this to bring across that it is actually possible to reverse aging. Even maybe commentary from some of the scientists whom we know well could be utilized in this respect. The only question is, how do we make that consistent with the game aesthetic and also entertaining to our younger demographic? But I wouldn't even be averse to, for instance, animated images of Aubrey de Grey or Bill Andrews. We have a picture of Aubrey de Grey in Death is Wrong that I will show. Here he is. So a cutscene where Aubrey appears or Bill appears, that's within the realm of possibility. So thank you for that discussion. And I think in terms of lifestyle elements, we do also want to be careful in a certain sense not to imply that lifestyle can do everything, because as we know, good lifestyle choices can bring benefits and can lead to modest life extension, but no lifestyle choice today is going to make one live to be 150. And we do want to emphasize with the game that scientific advances are necessary as well. And in order to pursue scientific advances, we need to support emerging research. So there will be that kind of balance that will need to be struck within the game. So any further comments from our panelists about anything that has been said?
Well, I believe some time ago we discussed putting in different people, different luminaries in the community. So I would be perfectly okay with that, and it's great that if folks get to know them and we get a sort of history of the ideas, even something like Denham Harmon, even though that's sort of outdated at this point, but it ties in with free radical damage, mitochondria, and all of that. So, yeah, educate and inspire. That's the mission here.
Well, yeah, I like that idea. I mean, imagine playing it and then you're like, wait a minute, this is a real guy? Who's this guy? You know, and then they're going to go and look, find Aubrey de Grey and be like, oh, whoa, there's all of this stuff that I didn't know about. You know, so that's cool.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And essentially, we will reach out to the scientists whom we are acquainted with. And as our longtime viewers know, Aubrey has been a recurring guest on our salons, and Bill Andrews has been as well. Liz Parrish has been a guest frequently, and we'll see who among them would like to have cameo appearances in LEV the game.
To be immortalized in the game.
Be immortalized. Yes, indeed. Alan also writes a pedagogical model where the player is required to learn a lesson and then use that new knowledge to solve a problem to advance is good as well. So yes, I think that's worth exploring. We have a comment from Temple Ray, kind of on a different thread. Temple Ray says, I believe in God, but I think God wants humanity to progress, and I believe aging will be cured no later than 2045, probably sooner. Well, Aubrey's estimate, it's a probabilistic estimate, is that there's a 50% probability of reaching longevity, escape velocity within 12 to 15 years from now. So mid-2030s to late 2030s at this point, but 2045 is also within the realm of possibility. Again, there's a probability distribution essentially around when these advances will arrive. LEV, the game, captures that pretty well, in my view. But Temple Ray, I hope that you are correct, and by 2045, we will have the therapies that would allow us to reach longevity, escape velocity. Thank you for that comment. But I think it's not guaranteed. I think we need a much broader base of support within our society to actually bring that about. And we need the younger generation to be inspired to work on these advances, and at the very least, not to oppose them, not to become enthralled by doomsaying rhetoric, thinking, oh, everything is becoming worse because of climate change or because of whatever the stated cause for alarm is. And these may be real problems, but I don't think they should be looked at as a death sentence for the human species. I don't think they should be looked at as a cause for despair. And Francois Joanneau says, if one can help youngsters refrain from self-destructing behaviors, that's worth the burden. And this goes back to the comment that I made previously, that for a person who is young, engaging in risky or even intentionally self-destructive behaviors is the #1 way to reduce one's life expectancy. So yes, playing a game called Death is Wrong puts one in an entirely different mindset, that life is good and death is bad. And if the whole objective of this game is not to die and to eliminate the sources of mortality, what is that kid going to do in the rest of his or her life? Hopefully that kid isn't going to go out and engage in self-destructive or needlessly risky behaviors, because death is wrong will be on that kid's mind. So thank you very much for that comment. And Matt Richards has a comment along these lines. He says, yes, death is wrong, aging is bad. We need to put this at the center of humanity, and that's what this game aims to accomplish. And Daniel writes, Jason has a great point about collaborative game designing becoming a powerful organizing tool. Yes, this is a way to keep people in our community engaged. Ultimately, we need to have many ways for people to contribute, and people do approach us quite frequently asking, well, what can they do? And this is an easy way that they can contribute. Even if they're not artists or game designers themselves, they can contribute ideas, they can contribute graphical assets as well. So thank you for that, Daniel. And Jason, you made a comment about the tools that you've linked to in the Future Humans Media group. If you want to elaborate upon that, please feel free. Let's see. I think we might come back to Jason on that. But yes, we will find a way to gather this input. One request that I would make of our viewers in the chat is, if you're interested in contributing images, files, any sorts of assets, code, music, either music that you've created or music that's available in the public domain or as Creative Commons outputs, please indicate that in the chat. If you would like us to reach out to you once we set up this common directory where you'll be able to contribute, I think it would be good to have a record of that, so that then it would be easy for us to send emails. If you have a preferred way of being contacted, either via email or some other medium, or if I know how to contact you already, then you don't have to do that. But it's a good idea for us to just get an initial gauge of who's willing to collaborate with us on that. So thank you very much. And Matt Richards also points out he's looked at many videos from Brian Johnson and feels that he is getting more and more comprehensive on his messages. Hopefully he will increase people's will to engage in the fight. So I actually saw Brian Johnson present on 2 occasions. One was at Longevity Summit Dublin in 2023, and another was at RadFest later on in Anaheim in September of 2023. And I do think it's quite encouraging that a billionaire now has an explicitly anti-death message, and he wears shirts that say, "Don't die." He points to defeating death as an explicit priority of his. And this is what we need more wealthy, influential, and powerful people to be doing. So I applaud him on that. Now, obviously, his regimen is not going to be for everybody, and some people will have differences with the specific approaches that he undertakes. But I think his intentions are quite laudable. Mike Lazine writes, the biggest problem for people to extend their lifespan would be for those on a fixed income. Those who make 6 figures would gain access to LEV tech first, and the super rich. Well, the question is, how long of a time gap will there be? And we have seen with the acceleration of technological advancement that the technology, while it does spread to wealthier people first, spreads to the general population much sooner than it used to. If you look at the time gap between the creation of the first electrical systems within the home and the time when the majority of homes in the United States had electricity, several decades passed. Or the time between the invention of the first automobiles and the ability of the majority of Americans to own an automobile. Again, a few decades passed at the very least, and it took Henry Ford and the assembly line in order to really render automobiles available to the majority of the population. But then if you look at the time between, for instance, the internet being made available to anyone and the public having access to it very affordably, or cell phones, for example. Right now, subsistence farmers in sub-Saharan Africa have access to cell phones. So that time lag between the initial development of the technology and its adoption continues to shrink. And the hope is that as soon as these technologies become available, there will be concerted efforts to give broad public access to them, in large part because not just private companies, but governments will recognize that this is a lot less expensive than having people age and succumb to the very expensive diseases that accompany older biological ages. So Mike responds, the fixed income issue would also be subject to where one lives. In states like California, he would suggest for a lot of the LEV tech to be state covered, since the cost of living is really high. And cost of living, especially in California, is an immense problem right now. I would acknowledge that. The Transhumanist Party supports technological ways to overcome that, like 3D printing of houses, for instance. We have construction techniques already available that could greatly expand the housing stock. There just has to be the will to do that, and the deregulation that needs to happen in order to actually allow people to build, get rid of the zoning laws, get rid of the NIMBY influence that restrains development, and you would see costs of living plummet. But these are important issues. I would say broader philosophical issues. I would welcome further suggestions about the game and future directions. Go ahead, Jason.
I just wanted to say something about Brian Johnson, real quick. I kind of think he's getting a bad rap in the mainstream media, like he's some kind of weird or something. I don't really think it's all that weird. I'm wondering what you guys think. I mean, the thing about where his son and his dad and they got together and they did this blood transfusion, you know, I've give plasma a bunch of times. I don't know if people are scared of the needles or if that's what it is, or why does it seem weird? It doesn't seem all that weird to me. If I had, you know, a dad, I would do a blood transfusion. It's not that I don't know. I'm just wondering what you guys think. Why is that being taken as weird? It doesn't seem weird to me. But that's it.
Well, there are some questions about whether parabiosis, which is the technical name of the procedure where you replace old blood with young blood, actually meaningfully extends life or reverses biological aging. So with the mice, where they hooked up the circulatory systems of a young mouse and an older mouse, the scientists who actually did that research initially, Michael and Irina Conboy, actually observed that it wasn't so much the young blood that provided benefits, it's the removal of the old blood or the dilution of the old blood that reduced essentially the prevalence of the harmful substances in the old blood. So it's not clear that Brian Johnson actually benefits from his son's blood, except to the extent that he may be replacing some of the toxic elements in his own blood, though he's probably not that old to really experience that. But it's an open question. In terms of the PR perception of it, I think there's a lot of this mythology associated with vampirism, for instance, and people find it off-putting, anything having to do with getting somebody else's blood. And Brian Johnson kind of likes to play on that a bit. So he has stated that his PR approach is actually to be provocative and to get some people to be upset at him. He has said that if you don't have 50% of people upset at you, then you're not being radical enough, essentially, or provocative enough, because he wants to a certain extent, get a rise out of people to drive publicity for the cause. Now, those of you who know me know that that's not my approach. That's not what I seek to do, including with these games. So what I want to do is to make sure that essentially we have a broad base of support for life extension, and we have people who are interested in any of a variety of ways. So they could be casual enthusiasts, they could be people who will do anything to extend their lifespans. They could be people who want to live a little bit longer and be free of disease. They could be people who would extend their lifespans indefinitely. We want everybody to be part of this broad-based coalition, because ultimately what matters would be their incremental contributions to the fight against death and decay. So I would take a different tactic for messaging from Brian Johnson. I would say, let's look at the science, let's look at the evidence, and let's give people many possible gateways to join our movement. But I do recognize that Brian Johnson is attracting attention, and that attention could be positive to some extent, in that it's getting people to talk about life extension more generally, and hopefully in a way that leads to more people becoming involved in the field. So I think that is a good distillation of my perspective on him, but I look forward to seeing what he comes up with next. So anyway, I think we've gathered a great deal of input about the game. I would welcome any final comments from Jason or Zach or Art Ramon. Any ideas?
Maybe later on, after we get the first one done, we can connect them to different kinds. Like after you beat the platformer game, you can go to a Zelda type game. Those are funner in my opinion. They're still 2D and they're still simple, but Zelda was funner than Mario in my opinion. I like them adventure games where you got, you know, the whole map and stuff. So I look forward to making all kinds of stuff. That's fun for me. I'd almost rather make the game if I can than play the game sometimes. I don't know, maybe that was because when I was younger, I was the only one that was able to be the dungeon master, so I'd learned how to have fun with it, I guess. I don't know, but I like making stuff. You know, it's fun.
Yes, you certainly do. And we see that in your voluminous creative output. A lot of it is now available on the Transhuman Club website, transhuman.club, as well as on your YouTube channel, where you have a lot of your music videos. And of course, our musical collaborations are part of that, and they're accessible on my YouTube channel. But it's an interesting idea. The question is, how does the programming for that get implemented? If the mechanics of future levels are significantly different from previous levels, how does that compare to the costs of programming very similar levels from a gameplay perspective? So that's something to think about. What is the increase in budget?
It's like a change of the whole engine or whatever.
Right.
Like in a platform game, there's like that engine. And then it's really easy to probably make more levels that are just like that. But then to change it to an overhead kind of Zelda game is like a whole different thing or whatever.
Yes, yes. And that's definitely important to keep in mind. We do want to make the development of this game sufficiently inexpensive that we will have a fully playable version this year. So we are open to a lot of creative possibilities, but think of creativity on a budget, essentially. So what is easy to integrate, especially if it's free? We like that, because then, as with, say, a lot of AI generated artworks or open source artworks, we could use as many of them as would fit the theme and the aesthetic of the game. But if it's going to cost, say, many thousands of dollars to implement a different concept, we have to think very carefully about whether we want to do that. But again, if it's possible to do inexpensively, that's something to consider, most certainly. Any comments from Art Ramon or Zach?
Yeah, I'll go. I know GitHub is what we used to use to centralize a lot of those graphics I used to create back a few years. So I remember I had a program on my desktop that would synchronize the folders on my computer with GitHub, and that's how I was able to, upload that to a site where you could reach them or anyone else could reach them. So that's probably the better site to use because that's actually made for all sorts of software development. You can do versioning and whatnot. I've never done it with that, so I'm not too familiar with the details, but that's what the site is for.
Yeah, Art's right. I haven't used GitHub that much either because I don't know how to code or whatever, but he's right.
And it's not just that you said you could just upload bulk files. I'm not sure what the limit is, but you can upload a lot. And all everyone has to do is create their own GitHub account if you don't have one. And I was going to say something else, but I tried using Unity back a few years. When you first introduced the LAV idea, I was thinking of a Temple Run version, but it was quite complex. I mean, I went through a lot of tutorials. on learning how to use Unity, but it was very complex. Then my computer died. And then computer died. It took all the tutorials I was using to learn with it. And then I never got around to replacing that powerful PC. That was a much more powerful PC. Now I just got a very simple desktop that isn't powerful enough to really do much with.
That's the same thing that happened to me, man.
Yeah.
That same thing. I tried to get into using Unity and then higher in game engines and stuff, and my computer, and I was like, oh, and that's why I can't do it.
Yeah, I need at least like a $2,000 PC to really get it up there, that I can use it for any sort of development. I mean, this barely works for a lot of the video stuff I do, and sometimes not very well. Sometimes the screen goes blank, when I'm trying to create a video. So it barely keeps up with video production for the little video production that I use using CapCut. But yeah, it takes a bit of a powerful machine to do the game stuff. And one day I'll get around to buying a powerful PC to do that. I haven't played any VR since that computer died. So, my VR set's probably outdated now. But yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, the 3D stuff is real, hard. Takes a lot of PC to do it. And the VR stuff is a lot of PC. Yeah, that's my problem too. Go ahead.
Yes, and it does seem like Unity is quite resource intensive, especially for those of us who may have older computers that might have been state of the art, say 10 years ago. But I do know that both LEV the game and the Death is Wrong platformer were developed using Unity. So this is definitely a powerful tool that the people whom we've hired to program the games actually use as well. Mike Lazine says Unity is hard and so is Visual C++. Daniel Tweed writes, GitHub is worth learning in terms of making repositories and forks. And Mike Lazine writes, you can use Autodesk Maya on many PCs, but it becomes a problem with rendering and animation. So thank you for those comments. And Zach, any words before we conclude the salon?
Not massively. I mean, just, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So you have to literally, go for you have to shell out and make sure you can get a good solid foundation to make a game, whether it's living life or making a game. It's the same thing. You've got to work on it. And I think that's the only way around it. But I think the story has to be right. You can't build a game without the right story behind it, the idea. So the idea of what is the concept? Is the concept going to be? Are you an avatar? Is it an RPG game? Is it a strategy game? Is it a combination of all? I think I call it a hybrid combination. And then I think the other thing is to really build people into the game is to say, okay, let's make it real. So you play this game and you'll get a real benefit out of it. You will get this prize. You will get this benefit. So, I mean, I heard the thing about Brian Johnson. I'm not going to comment on that, but I'll just will say this, that that's easy to be very sort of gung ho with life when you're worth 400 million. It's not so easy to do that when you're on fixed income. And so I think what we need to be looking at is something that's far more attainable for the wider audience. I mean, again, to look at something we do with Rejuvicite, yes, it's a $22,000 procedure, but it lasts for 3 years. So it works out to $500 a month, which is still a lot of money, but it's worth spending $500 a month on your life, extending your life by 15 years. And that's what it does, or 10 years. That's what I think we should be looking at is trying to make the game so that we can create a story that's interesting, engrossing. You want to learn from it. It's a resource for learning, and also you actually can get some real world prizes that make a difference to your life. And I think if we can incorporate that, the graphics, the schmaffics, all that stuff will come together. You know, it's really about, you know, look, what's the most successful game in history? I think it's Tetris. I think it's Tetris. Well, Tetris is about as simple as it gets.
Yes. And sometimes simple games do have a lot of appeal. Now, with Tetris, of course, the difficulty increases quite considerably. And there was a story just recently of a kid who actually beat the game of Tetris, which was thought to be impossible. But he managed to do it through just very dedicated playing of the game. But the game was simple, but the difficulty was supposed to keep increasing to defeat even really good players at some point. But of course, the programmer's intentions aren't always what happens in reality. So this kid found a way to actually overcome all of that built-in difficulty. Nonetheless, yes, that is a tremendously engaging game. Mike Lazine, yes.
Can I just saw Mike wrote about $500 a month. Well, maybe you can't, maybe, but that is the top end stuff. But what I'm saying is that that's as is right now, and that's still in very early doors. We're still on phase 2. 1,000 people have gone through it. You know what I'm saying? So it's obviously the cost will go down, but obviously $500 today is not going to be $500 in 3 years' time, as we know. So it's that's another difference. But it is this, you know, yes, you have to pay for something to keep yourself alive. I mean, you can't just have it for free. But it does, it is certainly affordable, certainly better than 200,000 a year.
Well, wouldn't you maybe want to do a discount instead of just like free? Because what if 1,000 people win the game? I mean, you can't do, you know, this. I like the idea of having, you know, prizes in that, but there's this idea of what's the cost on the end. Education is free to give out as prizes, but I guess we're already going to have that in there. You know, at the end, maybe we can, you know, then lead them to like membership in, you know, different places. As well, could be, trying to think of what kind of rewards can we give. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I was going to say that
I'm breaking up, so go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll fix you later with some Rejuvenate. But I mean, what we can do is like it's the first person to win level 3 wins a freebie, right? It's the first person. That's like it's only one prize. It's not like you're not going to get a medal for coming 7th, right? It's just first, and that's it. But the reality is there's plenty of other aspects, because there are so many aspects to, as Gennady was talking about, lifestyle choices and things like that. There are so many offerings that we can provide that are not the full whack. And the idea is obviously you have to start somewhere and get this into something that's an affordable aspect of your life. I mean, everyone has a cell phone. You pay $100 a month for a cell phone, or $50 a month. No one questions that. No one questions spending however much it is on some ice cream down at the local Baskin Robbins. No one ever questions that, because it's your mindset. And so once that mindset is changed, you'll suddenly realize it's worth more. What's more better, that sugar rush for that 5 minutes, or 5 years of extra quality of life so you can do what you want to do? I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, indeed. And Alan has an interesting comment here. He writes, creativity on a budget, the dilemma of all creativity for profit. And in our case, it's not even for profit in the sense that we're not intending to earn a profit from this game. We will be making it available for free. It's just a matter of getting the game out there. So I do want to make sure that the game development can be quick enough that this could happen this year, ideally. So we do have the dilemma of creativity on a budget, though, and this is where the community can be of tremendous help to us. And Alan also writes, yes, get the story right, then match the mechanics to the message. That is what we hope to do. And Zack also says, though budgets drive creativity, I think because we do then have to consider what is the most economical way to reach a particular objective. We have to figure out a way to work within these constraints and then still do something that is impactful, that is of high quality. And I've certainly had situations at various functions within my life and various projects that I've engaged in where I've had a $0 budget and I still had to make something happen. And then one's creativity really does get an impetus because one has to think, well, what is available already that can be repurposed or used in some different way to achieve the desired objective. But of course, having a little bit of money to fund this kind of endeavor, especially if you need to hire someone with a skill set that one doesn't have oneself, can only help, I think. So thank you to everybody for an interesting discussion. I hope that you enjoyed the demonstration of the game. I hope that you enjoyed the preview of what is to come, some of the graphical assets that we have. But one key takeaway is this is very much a work in progress, and how it turns out will depend on the participation of the community. So we will set up a repository for people to contribute to. And again,
that's what I
please
was mostly thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe after we do that, could we put that in, maybe we should put that in the description of this YouTube thing, so that way later on, if we come back, we can know where to find it or whatever.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
You can provide a link in the description to some sort of Google Drive destination or another repository that people could readily access, and then people could upload their files there. I may want to implement some sort of gatekeeping to that, just to make sure that the people who get that access are individuals we know and trust to some extent. And that's why, again, anybody who wants to contribute, please state your interest here in the chat, or if you're viewing this after the live stream, you can make a comment on YouTube, or you can make a comment on X, formerly Twitter. Any of those ways will enable us to note that you are interested in contributing assets to the Death is Wrong platformer game. And Daniel, I think you have the sentiment exactly right. Game on and prosper.